I'm sure we've all asked ourselves this question at some point. Much like the musical of the same name, why are there so many cats?
We all know that the allegiances of the Warriors books have been getting progressively longer, the latest containing many dozens of cats throughout the Four Clans and beyond. Over the course of over 80 books, Warriors has amassed a cast of over 1,000 named characters, hundreds of which have received significant character development, considering just how many of them there are. Warriors isn't the only series to have such a huge number of characters. Naruto, Transformers, Homestuck, Power Rangers, Bleach, among other series, are all very popular pieces of media with casts ranging in the hundreds, if not over 1,000 characters. All of these series are immensely popular, some achieving cult popularity statuses. So what is it about large-scale casts that is so appealing to audiences, and why does it not always work? The difference between Warriors and some other series with large casts is that despite this huge number of characters, a large proportion of those characters are very memorable and relatable. Especially out of ThunderClan, any long-time reader can name at least a handful of cats that made a lasting impression on them. This is an impressive feat for any piece of media. Managing such a large cast in the first place is no easy task, but to give each character the development it needs to make an impact on readers is a huge challenge to take on. With the exception of the first series, where Fireheart takes the obvious spotlight, Warriors has typically taken the approach of the ensemble cast. In an ensemble cast, there is no definitive main character, but instead a wider selection of protagonists, each of which receive equal weighting and importance in storytelling. Time spent with each character is evenly distributed, and each contributes in equal amounts to the narrative. This is an interesting mode of storytelling. Taking away the importance of a singular protagonist means there is greater focus on events and relationships rather than on individual drives, thoughts and feelings, because readers are seeing the same events from multiple angles. This gives readers greater freedom to interpret those events as they choose, rather than seeing them through a biased perspective. A major issue a lot of series with an ensemble cast face is that with so many characters, if not enough care is taken to make each individual character engaging, the story can become cluttered and feel hard to follow. If characters aren't memorable, then each one starts to blend with another to the point where the story feels indistinguishable, and it can seem as though the story lacks focus and drive. But when done correctly, ensemble casts have huge benefits for a story. Massive casts, especially in the fantasy genre, add scale to a piece that a smaller cast just can't do by itself. With so many characters, conflicts grow to a much larger scale. There is far more at stake when conflict threatens the clan simply because the cast is so massive. You need only read The Darkest Hour again to get a sense of how well this has worked in the Warriors series' favour. By this stage in the series, readers are wholly invested in the lives of these dozens of cats, and when BloodClan threatens to take their lives away from them, the conflict feels huge because there is so much at stake for so many characters. When something threatens the clans, more is risk than just the lives of a handful of main characters. A whole way of life is threatened, and readers know it. This is so effective because when reading a series like Warriors, there is a sense that the world feels lived in. The clan's territories are full of life, and each cat is given the freedom in the writing to live out its own narrative. Minor characters, just like the protagonists, have families, best friends, romances, conflicts. There's never a point where the Warriors world feels unpopulated and uneventful, because the main characters aren't the only ones to contribute to the overarching story. There's always something going on in the lives of these cats, even during periods that aren't driven by the main plot. Importantly, it doesn't feel like the world of Warriors is entirely driven by the main characters. In traditional storytelling, the protagonist is usually driven by a primary goal, an endpoint that they aim for throughout the series. But with so many characters, just like in real life, there is no one goal that all of those characters share. Instead, the central conflict usually revolves around an event. This is evident in how different the first two series are in their resolutions. Wherein the prophecies begin when we are focused on Fireheart's narrative, we see the traditional bum-to-hero storyline. With one main protagonist, we are focused on their goals and their rise to greatness. In the new prophecy, where attention is divided across Leafpaw, Squirrelpaw and Brambleclaw, the story is now no longer driven primarily by character goals. While each character does have their own goals, the central conflict of the story is now based around an event. The resolution of the new prophecy after 6 books is not a meaningful change in character arc for any one character, while the characters do certainly grow. But instead the cats arrive at a new understanding of each other in light of the event, a paradigm that has been followed for the rest of the series. Because of how these story events affect every character, readers never feel like the main characters are doing everything despite the story being told from their eyes. It's much easier to be invested in the daily dramas of these talking cats because the world actually does feel real as you're reading it. This suspension of disbelief is possible because a large cast supports the context of Warriors well. Large family groups living and fighting together, with different cats taking different roles to support their clan, the cast needs to be large to support the way the world is set up. Sure, sometimes we read a name and we can't attach it to a cat we actually remember, but those are typically members of other clans, and these name drops make the world feel more lived in. After all, who can say they really knew everyone who attended their high school or lived in their hometown? There are just some names that will always be names, and that's real life. What's important is that those closest to the story are developed well enough to tell that story. Large ensemble casts allow for the development of characters like this, as they allow authors to write a larger range of types of characters than with smaller casts. No two cats in Warriors are the same, because each one has something unique to offer to the story. There is opportunity to experiment with different character motivations, flaws, personalities, ideals. The list goes on. Two cats that might seem similar at first glance are below the surface, fundamentally different. Each character brings something new to the table that another cannot. When you're spending such short bursts of time with each individual cat, every chapter needs to be packed with shots that establish definitive character, and the Aryans do this perfectly. These characters progress too, just as the story does. New characters are introduced systematically and periodically as young kits that we get to follow the growth and development of as they grow into warriors in their own turn. This is maintained throughout each arc with the passing of beloved characters and the birth of new ones, so that the clans remain dynamic and ever-changing to maintain the interest of readers. Part of why the readership of Warriors is so well maintained is because many of us read the books as children and continue to be invested to this day. A stranger to the series would struggle to pick up the latest book in the series and be able to comprehend what is happening without reading earlier books, because Warriors isn't designed to be read as a standalone story. It's an epic saga, spanning generations of cats, all of which readers come to know and love over the course of reading each arc. Our attachment to these characters is part of what makes Warriors so great. We want to know what happens in the lives of these cats because we've been able to watch them develop over the course of their lives, and the livelihood of their clans has become important to us. We want to see their conflicts resolved, and we want to see where their individual character arcs take them. More emotional investment for so many characters means more readers stick around to see the conclusion and continuations of their dozens of stories.